I take extra precautions not to hurt any of my stuntmen because their livelihood is they don't have any compensation. They get hurt. They go on unemployment.
It all started during a surprise appearance Chuck Norris made on a late-night podcast that had absolutely no business pulling a legend of his stature. The show, The Pit Stop with Johnny Lane, usually featured underground comedians, B-list horror directors, and the occasional YouTuber who just got canceled. So when Chuck Norris walked in unannounced during a taping, draped in his classic denim shirt and that unmistakable steel-gazed expression, jaws hit the floor. There was no intro music, no prepared statement, just Chuck, standing there with a calm that made you feel like something serious was about to go down. And then it did. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. With the host too stunned to talk, and the other guests, 2 Twitch streamers and a former WWE personality, murmuring in disbelief, Chuck walked up to the mic and simply said, "There are 5 actors in Hollywood I can't stand. I'm going to name them." He didn't flinch. He didn't laugh. This wasn't satire. This wasn't a bit. Chuck Norris, the man who's become a living meme of invincibility, the martial artist who roundhouse kicked his way through the cultural lexicon for decades, was here to drop names like live grenades. And he did. The room fell into a stunned silence. No one had any clue what had triggered this moment. Chuck Norris doesn't do this kind of thing. He's notoriously private, calm, and calculated. He avoids gossip and rarely engages in industry politics. That's what made what followed so utterly riveting. He wasn't ranting. He wasn't yelling. This wasn't the wild energy of a celebrity on a breakdown spiral. This was measured. This was personal. The first name he dropped, Alec Baldwin. Now, people expected this to be some kind of vague Hollywood beef, maybe stemming from differing politics, Chuck being known for his conservative stance, Baldwin being outspoken on the left. But Chuck didn't talk about politics. He talked about integrity, saying Baldwin's on-set behavior and the way he treats crews was unforgivable. There was no mention of the tragic shooting on the set of Rust, and perhaps out of respect for the gravity of that incident, Chuck bypassed any direct reference. Instead, he focused on what he described as a long pattern of disrespect behind the scenes, something Norris claimed he'd witnessed firsthand while visiting a mutual contact on a different set years ago. The second name came quickly, Shaun Penn. At this point, even the host, who had recovered enough to sit upright and stop looking like he was witnessing an alien abduction, tried to interject. "Wait, Shaun Penn? Like Mystic River Shaun Penn?" he stammered. Chuck didn't blink. He continued, speaking about the hypocrisy he saw in Penn's humanitarian efforts, claiming they were more about cameras than compassion. "A man who brings a film crew to a refugee camp," Chuck said, "isn't there for the right reasons." It was a bold accusation, and one that sent ripples through the online world within minutes of the clip airing. Third was a name that surprised everyone, Vin Diesel. This one caught people off guard. Vin Diesel, the beloved face of the Fast and Furious franchise, isn't typically a lightning rod for controversy, at least not in the way the first 2 names might be, but Chuck went there. According to him, Diesel's image of family and loyalty was a front, and he alleged that Diesel had repeatedly undermined stunt coordinators and martial arts consultants on his films. Norris, a lifelong practitioner and defender of martial arts integrity in film, took that personally. "He disrespects the craft," Chuck said. "He makes it about muscles, not movement. That's not action. That's arrogance." At this point, you could hear a pin drop. Fourth was Shia LaBeouf. Now this name, while not shocking considering LaBeouf's tumultuous public journey, still landed hard. Chuck acknowledged Shia's talent, but said that wasn't enough. "Talent without discipline is dangerous," he stated firmly. He referenced stories about Shia's behavior on the set of Fury and Lawless, and made a pointed comment about method acting being no excuse for abusing co-stars and crew. Chuck didn't delve into the deeper allegations that have emerged against Shia in recent years, but the implication was clear. He saw LaBeouf as someone who squandered opportunity through ego and chaos. And then came the 5th and final name, Steven Seagal. At first, people thought maybe Chuck was going to pivot to humor here. After all, the rivalry, or rather the implied rivalry, between Norris and Seagal has been internet fodder for decades. But Chuck didn't smile. He didn't make a joke. This wasn't lighthearted. "I respected him once," Chuck said, his voice quieter. "But ego ruined him, and worse than that, he became cruel." He alluded to Seagal's alleged treatment of stuntmen, his documented on-set aggression, and the way he postured as a martial arts master while disrespecting the very discipline he claimed to represent. And just like that, Chuck turned and walked off the set. No dramatic outro, no follow-up statement, just silence. A walkout worthy of a Western movie ending. Except this was very real. The video clip hit social media within minutes, and it spread like wildfire. Hashtags exploded. #ChuckDrop, #Norris5, and even #5fists began trending on Twitter and Instagram. Reaction videos popped up overnight. News outlets scrambled to verify the appearance and get statements from the actors named, none of whom initially responded. The implications of this moment were colossal, not because of the hate itself, Hollywood is no stranger to feuds, but because of who it came from. Chuck Norris isn't your average celebrity. He's practically folklore. A man whose name alone sparks 1,000 memes and whose reputation up until now had been almost universally untouchable. He wasn't known for shade. He wasn't known for gossip, which made his list all the more piercing. It wasn't just a list of people he disliked. It was a list of people he felt had betrayed something bigger, values like respect, humility, and integrity. The public didn't know what to make of it at first. Was this an old man finally venting after years of silent frustration? Or was it a carefully calculated moment meant to shine a spotlight on parts of the industry that often stay hidden? And if it was the latter, why now? Part of the intrigue stemmed from Chuck's timing. He's been relatively quiet in recent years, choosing more low-key projects and largely stepping away from public life. When he did appear, it was usually for veterans' causes, martial arts events, or faith-based speaking engagements. To emerge from that relative silence with such a blistering statement, one made without malice but still heavy with disappointment, felt almost mythic, like a warrior stepping out of retirement to deliver one final strike, not for glory, but for honor. Even more fascinating was the nature of his grievances. None of them were about celebrity drama. There was no mention of roles lost, paychecks undercut, or personal slights. Every one of Chuck's criticisms centered on character. How these men treated others, how they represented their crafts, how they conducted themselves when the cameras weren't rolling. This wasn't Hollywood beef. This was something deeper, ethical, philosophical. Fans began dissecting his words like scholars examining sacred texts. Martial arts forums lit up with discussions on the philosophy behind Chuck's criticisms, how honor and discipline are cornerstones of the martial tradition, and how those values often clash with the performative chaos of celebrity culture. Norris had, in one unannounced appearance, reignited a conversation about what it means to be a man in Hollywood, not in the superficial machismo-fueled sense, but in the quiet strength, disciplined humility sense. And people were hungry for that. For years, the public has watched the industry teeter between facade and authenticity. We've seen actors deliver inspiring speeches while their co-stars whisper horror stories. We've seen award shows celebrate emotional depth while production crews get treated like props. Chuck's statement sliced through all of that like a roundhouse kick to the soul. He wasn't talking about fame. He was talking about decency. The ripple effects reached far beyond Twitter. Film students began rewatching old Chuck Norris movies not just for action but for the principles behind the action. Clips from Walker, Texas Ranger trended not for their camp value, but for the stoic moral lessons embedded in each episode. Even within Hollywood, some insiders began posting cryptic messages of support, hinting that Chuck wasn't alone in his disillusionment. It was as if a silent agreement had been broken, and now the silence itself was cracking open. What stood out the most, however, was how the public responded to each name on that list. With Baldwin, the reactions ranged from nods of agreement to spirited defenses. With Penn, it sparked a firestorm of debate about activism and authenticity. Diesel's name caused confusion and even heartbreak among Fast and Furious diehards. LaBeouf's inclusion was met with a mix of sadness and recognition, given his well-documented battles. And Siegel? His was the only name that drew near universal agreement. But even then, Chuck's tone wasn't mocking. It was mournful, a lament for what could have been. Each name came with its own storm. But together they formed something larger, a portrait of what Chuck saw as Hollywood gone wrong. It was a warning, a reckoning, and maybe even a challenge, a dare to do better, to be better. And Chuck didn't stick around to explain it. He didn't capitalize on it. He didn't go on a press tour or drop a memoir titled My 5 Enemies. He simply vanished into the same mist he emerged from, leaving behind 5 names, 1,000 questions, and the quiet echo of an unexpected moment that may never be repeated. But for those who heard it, really heard it, it was unforgettable. Not because Chuck Norris hated 5 actors. but because in his own unshakable way he reminded us all that strength without character is just a show. And Chuck Norris never cared much for shows. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Chuck Norris naming 5 actors he hates? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.